You're listening to We Have a Spiritual Problem, the podcast where we explore the cracks in our culture, our consciousness, and our assumptions, and ask what those cracks are trying to let in. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong. I am not a theologian or a philosopher, at least by training. I am a PhD exercise physiologist with an interest in the intersection of the physical and the spiritual. We've all had those moments, quiet or life-shifting, where something in us seems to awaken. Maybe it's standing at the edge of a canyon, or watching a child be born, or even just sitting in silence and suddenly feeling profoundly connected, not to an idea, not to a belief, but to everything. These moments disrupt the story we've been told, that we're just isolated minds and meat machines, navigating a material world of dead matter. Something in those feelings feels true. Something in those moments feels alive. But what is that feeling? And more importantly, what does it mean? That's what we're exploring today. The evolution of consciousness from a spiritual perspective, not as something that happens to us, but something that happens through us. Long before neuroscience, MRI scans, and brain chemistry, ancient civilizations had profound insights into the nature of reality. To them, the cosmos was not a thing, it was a being. Consciousness wasn't in the world, it was the world. Egyptians, Vedic sages, and shamans of the Americas, each in their own way spoke of the unity between mind, spirit, and nature. The mythologies they passed down were not just stories. They were symbolic maps of the inner and outer worlds, of consciousness in communion with creation. The connection between humans and nature wasn't metaphorical. It was ontological. The tree had a spirit. The river had memory. The stars had names and purpose. These weren't primitive ideas. They were experiential truths. These perspectives are echoed in the writings of Teilhard de Chardin, the 20th century French Jesuit mystic and scientist I've referred to many times in this podcast. Teilhard proposed that evolution wasn't just biological, it was spiritual. From the Big Bang to the biosphere, to the rise of self-awareness, he saw an arrow of evolution moving toward increasing complexity, interiority, and unity. His concept of the omega point is the culmination of this journey, a final convergence where all consciousness is united in divine wholeness. It's the modern resurrection of ancient wisdom in a modern idiom. But as Western civilization evolved, we split spirit from matter, soul from science. Philip Goff credits Galileo. The Enlightenment brought with it many gifts, reason, inquiry, progress. But it also brought reductionism. The universe became a machine. The mind became an illusion. Consciousness was downgraded to an accidental glitch in the brain. And yet, science still can't explain it. Neuroscience can tell us where things happen in the brain, but not how subjective experience arises. This is what philosopher David Chalmers calls, quote, the hard problem of consciousness, unquote. The fundamental difficulty in explaining how physical processes in the brain give rise to conscious experience. Enter Philip Goff, a leading voice in the modern revival of Panpsychism. Goff argues that consciousness isn't something the brain creates, it's something the brain organizes. In other words, consciousness is not an emergent property of complexity, it's a fundamental aspect of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. This is not woo. It is not mysticism pretending to be science. It's metaphysics backed by serious philosophical and empirical inquiry. And here's where I find it gets interesting. Panpsychism doesn't necessarily tell us that rocks are thinking, but that all matter may possess a kind of proto-consciousness. It's a framework that allows for consciousness to be everywhere, in differing degrees, not kinds. This turns the entire materialistic world on its head. Suddenly, the idea that the cosmos is alive again feels not just poetic, but possible. Combine this with the influence of Eastern traditions, Taoism, Vedanta, Mahayana Buddhism, which emphasize the unity of mind and reality, and you begin to see a new paradigm emerging, one in which spiritual insight and scientific mystery aren't at odds. They're both pointing beyond the veil. So what happens when we carry this insight into the future? Teilhard and biogeochemist Vladimir Vernadsky imagined the next phase of human evolution, the development of the Noosphere, a global layer of consciousness that would link all minds into a unified field, a kind of planetary nervous system, not just of data, but of spirit. Today, that idea feels eerily prescient. We are connected in real time through technology, but connection is not the same as communion, and information is not the same as wisdom. We now face the very real possibility of AI systems outthinking us in logic, memory, and calculation. But can they understand compassion, mystery, and beauty? Will AI evolve consciousness? Or will it mirror the disconnection of our own fragmented awareness? This is where the spiritual perspective becomes critical. If evolution is not just about survival, but awakening, as Teilhard presupposes, then the real challenge is not building smarter machines, it's becoming deeper humans. Teilhard believed that love, not intelligence, is the driving force of the universe. And love, at its highest, is the force that unites us without erasing difference. This future, this spiritual evolution, won't happen to us. It will happen through us, through presence, through practice, through a radical reorientation toward wholeness. But what happens when we forget? We live in a time where anxiety, isolation, and despair are widespread. Our technologies have outpaced our wisdom. Our economies reward extraction, not compassion. And our cultural narratives rarely speak of soul. I view this as the tragedy of the commons. We have made consciousness a byproduct instead of a foundation. And in doing so, we've lost touch with the sacred. Teilhard called this the cosmic pessimism, the belief that life is fundamentally meaningless. He saw it as a great spiritual illness of the modern age. When consciousness is treated as an accident, life becomes accidental. When mind is severed from matter, spirit from science, self from nature, we become sick. That sickness, I would argue, is the spiritual problem of our time. But we can remember. We can reclaim the spiritual dimension of consciousness. We can bring together insights of mystics, monks, scientists, and philosophers to build a vision of evolution that honors both our biology and our soul. A spiritual evolution. Imagine education that nurtures the inner life, science that reveres mystery, technology that supports ecological and spiritual flourishing. Imagine a world that protects the commons. Imagine a culture where spiritual practices are not private escapes, but public virtues, where stillness, gratitude, and compassion are essential to civic life. And yes, I spell gratitude with 2 T's, an attitude of gratitude. This is not naive idealism. It's a remembering of what we've always known and what we are, once again, being invited to live into. As I detailed in episode 23, we are spiritual beings. Whether you believe there is a God or not, whether a God that is described in our religious practice, a God that is beyond our comprehension, or a higher power, a higher cosmic purpose, a reverence for creation, or an energy that underlies our existence, or you consider yourself an agnostic or an atheist, we cannot deny consciousness, that there is something greater than self. Even if we are participants in the Matrix or some cosmic video game, we are spiritual beings, though we might debate the specifics. So to recap, we've explored the ancient view of consciousness as interwoven with the cosmos. We've examined the limits of scientific materialism and the resurgence of spiritual metaphysics. We've met visionaries like Teilhard de Chardin and Philip Goff who offer a new vision of conscious evolution. We've considered the implications for our future, not just technologically, but spiritually. And we've asked what it might mean to live into the truth that consciousness is not an illusion, but the deepest reality there is. So let me leave you with this. What if evolution isn't about survival? What if it's about awakening? What if we are not just passengers on this cosmic journey, but participants? What if the next step in our evolution isn't out there at all, but in here? Continue to explore this with me. Ask your friends to join. Expand our reach by hitting the like button and subscribing or following where you get your podcast. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember, the problem isn't that we aren't spiritual. It's that we've forgotten what it means. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others.